Conversationalists across the fruited plain, it is Eric Erickson here, and I am delighted to be with you. And the phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, let's get straight into the Democratic racism. The soft bigotry of low expectations. I think that's a Daniel Patrick Moynihan quote. I can't remember who said it, but I think it was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He was a U.S. senator from New York who was a Democrat conservative. He was an interesting, very thoughtful guy about social policy and the breakdown of the family. I think at this point we need to say this. White progressives expect that black families want to live in crime-infested hellholes. That's why they're not interested in doing anything. I think there's a latent racism among a lot of progressives. And when a conservative black person comes forward and denounces it, they're called an Uncle Tom, among other things, by black progressives. What do we call the black progressives? They're like the apologists for Stalin at this point. You've got a breakdown in the family across the country, not just in black neighborhoods across the country, but particularly plaguing poorer black families in the inner city. And the left can't acknowledge it. They scream racism loudly, so we can't talk about it, in large part because it's a failure of progressive policies that have gotten us to this point. And they would rather scream racism than deal with the fallout of their policies and the progressive politicians in charge to implement the policies in those cities that continue to fail. Every single one of us has a section of a city where we live near that we know you can't go at night and some during the day. And to the progressive left in America, they want to live like that. This is a conversation for them, not us. Notice how they do that. It's a conversation for them, not us. And then they tell you there is no crime. I want to play for you two clips. The first clip is Peter Baker, who is the progressive reporter of the New York Times, his wife, Susan Glasser. Boy, they hate Donald Trump. Peter Baker the other day had the audacity to say that the biggest crime event in Washington, D.C. was January 6th. Actually, Mr. Baker, the biggest crime event in Washington, D.C. was the George Floyd riots that did much more damage to property, businesses, and individuals than what happened on January 6th. If you want to be real about it and take the data, there was more damage done during the George Floyd riots than on January 6th. And I'm not saying January 6th is good, but these white progressives can obsess about it because they don't even want to see the black violence. They pretend there is none because they would have to deal with the fallout of their policies if they addressed it. This is Peter Baker, and I want you to pay very close attention to what he says.
Military troops in the streets of a capital, the kind of thing you see in other countries, in autocratic countries, by autocratic leaders who are trying to assert control and power. If you really cared about crime in the District of Columbia, where crime is actually down historically, if you actually cared about crime in America, there are cities with worse crime rates than Washington, D.C. He's not sending troops into their streets. He's sending troops into the streets of the nation's capital, which has a special resonance. The idea that troops would be patrolling in any way, a nation's capital sends a message that we've never, seen again in this country outside of, riots and genuine uprisings that we don't see right now. Crime is at a low. As anybody who has grown up in the Washington area, as I did, I was born and raised in the Washington area, spent my whole life there, and it's never. We know what a crime crisis looks like. We've lived through that. This is not what that looks like.
Peter Baker, notice he says Washington area. Washington area. Peter Baker doesn't live in Washington, D.C. He lives in Falls Church, Virginia. Falls Church, Virginia is in Virginia, where they have engaged local law enforcement. Peter Baker does not live in Washington, D.C., and yet he wants to say he does. Peter Baker doesn't live anywhere near the crime in Washington, D.C. He has a car service that takes him to the Capitol or the White House when he needs it. He's not driving himself. He's nowhere near there. A good white progressive. And notice he also tries to use the optics of the Washington, D.C. You do understand that the president is sending the troops and taking over the police in Washington because it's a federal territory. It's under the control of the federal government, not actually a state. So Peter Baker wants to make it a big negative deal. It's actually literally the only place in the country the president can do what he's doing, and he's doing it as an example to show what happens when you get serious about cracking down on crime. So not only has he just misrepresented the entirety of what's happening to the MSNBC audience, as he does to his reader to the New York Times, he's also obfuscating. He's not really lying per se, but essentially he is by suggesting he lives there and there's no crime problem. He doesn't actually live where the crime is in Washington, D.C. He doesn't live in Washington, D.C. So let's go from Peter Baker now to a black reporter at MSNBC who actually lives inside Washington, D.C., and unlike Peter Baker, actually lives in Washington and experiences the crime.
And I live in Washington. This is personal for me. Many people are frustrated with crime that we see, particularly committed by juveniles in the city of Washington. People are frustrated, Willie, that when they go to CVS to buy deodorant, that they have to get it from behind locked plexiglass, right? But the response here, and let me say this, right? These are not just random anecdotes. What we see in Washington Post polling, among others, is that roughly half of DC residents, mostly half of DC residents, view this as a serious problem or an extremely serious problem.
Half of DC residents, a serious problem or an extremely serious problem. Peter Baker claims to live there. He doesn't. He doesn't live in Washington, D.C. Anthony Coley, that's the name of the reporter there, he does. And he says it's frustrating. Joe Scarborough this morning, I don't have the clip readily available, but Joe Scarborough this morning read a text message from a friend who is very liberal, who is struggling to care that the president is taking over the law enforcement in Washington because of how bad it is. The outrage from the leadership in Washington, D.C. is far more muted than the national Democrats. And yet the progressive left insists there's no problem. Because if the progressive left realized, recognized, or admitted there was a problem, they'd have to account for how it was their policies that caused it. You don't want to know how their policies cause it? Well, the D.C. City Council has passed a series of laws that have escalated the violence. Who are the leading causes of violence in D.C.? It's actually youths. It's 15 and 16-year-olds. Why? Well, Janine Piro went on Fox News this morning and explained it.
Gotcha. Let me just show our audience what you're trying to get the D.C. Council to do. You want them to repeal the Youth Rehabilitation Act, the Incarceration Reduction Amendment Act, and the Second Chance Amendment Act. I read through this, Janine. You're basically trying to eliminate the reductions in sentencing for serious crimes especially, and also to get away from hiding the record from those in the future who would look back on the crimes for which they were convicted.
Yeah.
Do I have that right? And if I do,
totally.
how would that change crime in Washington?
Well, what it would do is it would make people accountable, number one, and we're also looking to lower the age of criminals. What's happening is even if you shoot someone with a gun, you go to family court where the purpose is rehabilitation. You get to go to an ice cream social and you get to go to yoga classes. That's nonsense, and that's not what we need in the nation's capital, and that's not why the president put me here. The president wants to make the Capitol safe and beautiful, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And the only way to do that is to change the laws that have protected young children who are committing adult crimes. And all of these statutes that they've passed don't allow me to incarcerate. They allow the removal or the erasure of convictions. How fair is that to a parent who wants to find out whether or not a nanny is someone who's been convicted of a prior assault? How fair is that to an employer who doesn't get to understand or know who he's hiring? Everything about the D.C. Council and the laws that they've passed are liberal, they're defense-leaning, and they're not in favor of the citizens of D.C. And that's what President Trump is fighting, and that's what we're going to change.
Can I just say one thing? I was never really a fan of Judge Janine on Fox News. She always seemed to be playing a caricature. My gosh, she is with it and together here. She clearly knows her stuff. She is right where she needs to be in history. She really is. I mean, she knows the data. She knows the understanding. This is her background. This is her wheelhouse. People looked at her as a talking head on Fox News and like, who is this lady? This is actually, she was a judge. She knows what she's doing. She's the perfect fit for this job. If an Uncle Tom is a black person who is conservative and supports Republicans, what do you call the black politicians who support the white progressives who have overseen and been complicit in destroying their cities? What do you call them? Because you have these black sycophants who go on television, on MSNBC in particular, and insist that it's racist for Donald Trump to care about the black residents of their cities. Here's the ultimate problem, is that progressives care about classes of people. So progressives care about the BIPOC people. They care about the African American community. They don't care about the black family. They care about the people of color. They don't care about the particular black family living in Anacostia, serenaded by bullets at night. They care about the native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, but they don't care about the Hawaiian native who's moved to Oakland, California, and fears for his daughter's life at night. They care about the Asian American community, but they don't care about the Asian American shop owner in Chinatown who's regularly shoplifted from. They don't care about the individuals. They care about the classes of people. And according to the left, they've been indoctrinated in critical theory. Classes of people are victims of white people. So if you're a victim of a black person, you're not really a victim. And that's how polluted critical thinking has broken the brain to these people. You notice how the right has moved on from talking about critical theory, but it is so woven into the thinking of people on the left that they can't understand that a black family does not choose to live in a crime-infested hellhole. That's the decision of the progressive politicians who allowed it to happen. And they want better for themselves and their children. And it is real racism among the good white progressives of America to think that black people choose to live like this. And that they don't say it publicly, but you and I know damn well that people like Peter Baker, who doesn't see the crime and insists the crime isn't bad, he's not going to go through the southeast side of Washington, D.C. and deal with it and try to figure out what the problem is. Instead, he's going to say, well, I mean, they obviously want to live there. Why is Donald Trump doing something? And by the way, I have to say, while I'm throwing everything at them, I do need to point out that last night in Georgetown in Washington, D.C., the FBI went on parade, a show of force in Georgetown. Friends, the president intends to crack down on crime in Washington. It would behoove the FBI to go to the southeast part of Washington. There's not a crime wave in Georgetown. The carjackings are far from Georgetown. The murders are far from Georgetown. That's where the good white progressives live, so they don't have to see the crime. Go where the crime is. The mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, was on CNN. Listen to this nonsense.
Black women mayors have been the subject of lots of attacks. I think Karen Bass, from really the moment President Trump came to office in LA, is someone who's had to deal with that back and forth. He likes to pick fights. I think he sees the situation where there's that distinction. And by the way, this is one of the best fights to pick. Because what I have to sit in front of you and say is, yes, there are homicides in my city. Yes, there is crime, but we don't think the same prescription of help is necessary. It's a tough position, but I think, frankly, this is the situation we're in, and he's not really interested in trying to save lives for us, but just exploiting a political issue.
Yeah, you see, he's exploiting a political issue. He doesn't really care. Let me tell you about Kansas City, Missouri. They have a nonprofit grocery store that's going out of business because the thieves in the area have stolen so much produce. It was a for-profit enterprise, but the area was so crime-ridden, the grocery store was going to close, and the closest grocery store is 2 to 3 miles away. So the city took it over and turned it into a nonprofit. It's in one of the most crime-infested parts of Kansas City, Missouri, and they can't keep the store open because of all the shoplifting from the nonprofit grocery store. So it's going out of business. The people are going to be hungry because of the progressive politicians who claim Donald Trump's not trying to help when they're clearly not trying to help. The fact of the matter is progressives are subtly racist. They think black people, Hispanic people, poor people choose to live in crime-infested slums. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations. By the way, someone corrected me. It was Michael Gerson who came up with that, the soft bigotry of low expectations. And they have low expectations, the left does, for these people to elevate themselves out of poverty and elevate themselves out of crime-infested neighborhoods. And when Donald Trump comes along and cries that we should have better lives for these people and they should live in safety, what does the left do? They scream racism. Why? Because it's the only thing they know they can do, so they can avoid making eye contact with the problems their policies and their politicians created.
Have some